with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, a city that we both love. In fact, I lived there, and our guest coming up has actually lived there for a long time as well, actually the same time that I lived there, Hong Kong. And what is going on there? You know, I got to tell you, I've lived with the Hong Kong people, the most entrepreneurial, hardworking, keep to themselves people. You know, leave them alone. They leave you alone. A very safe place to be, a very exciting place, a very vibrant place to be. And you really, really got to do a lot to get them away from working and building their businesses and just running their lives. You really got to piss them off to get them out on the streets complaining about their government. And that's exactly what's going on right now. This outpouring of the Hong Kong people, it's just ripping my heart apart because I know how deeply felt it is what they're going through and what they see that's happening to their beautiful, beloved city, the city that they love so much, the freedom of their city, the economic freedom of their city, and what it's meant to the world. It's just a really, really, really dangerous situation we have going on in Hong Kong right now.
Well, you know, it is an amazing place to be. You know, what I find interesting, and I'm glad we're going to be talking about this. If you've been watching the news for the last few days, you know what struck out most to me, is the American flags that are being displayed during their protests. They're actually standing there in front of the Chinese military, and they're singing our national anthem. Is that not an amazing sight? Is that not an amazing screen bite? I mean, can you understand? We fight with people here to sing the national anthem and stand for it here. The folks in Hong Kong are literally on the streets protesting to get their rights, to have a democratic environment, and they're using our flag. I just think this is an amazing time.
Well said. Hey, we're very pleased to have on with us right now Mike Gonzalez from the Heritage Foundation, who is also an old Hong Kong guy, lived in Hong Kong in the 80s, and I lived there in the 80s and the early 90s. So, Mike, great to have you on the show, and it's gotta be, you just gotta be so upset with what's going on right now with this great city of Hong Kong.
Yeah, hi, Neil, and hello to your listeners. Thanks for having me on. Just two things I want to pick up on. The first one is the how special, what a jewel of a place Hong Kong is, which makes it a tragedy that Margaret Thatcher had to hand it over to the People's Republic of China, which is a communist system, which doesn't know what to do with a free, sophisticated entrepot like Hong Kong. That's the first thing. I mean, it really is a fantastic place. Everything you said, it's safe. The people are inventive. The people are hardworking. They're just a great 7 million people who lived on that island and that peninsula. The second one is that, yes, one of the most important things here is the fact that this tells us back to us again, this telegraphs back to us again how America is seen around the world as the citadel of liberty. When people cry for freedom and fight for freedom around the world, they don't use the emblems or symbols of any other country or society. We are still the society that means freedom and liberty to the world's 7 billion people.
So where do we go from here? I mean, what do you think ultimately President Xi's up to? I mean, what are his options? I mean, first of all, he's saying, hey, look, this is U.S. interference and, stay out of our local situation, and you're just stirring it up, and they're just a bunch of local terrorists. I think President Xi's actually using the word, calling them domestic terrorists, and, these are bad people, and they're doing military exercises on the border of Hong Kong and Shenzhen, and, they're flexing their muscles. I mean, could the China military come crashing over the border?
Nobody really knows of whether the Chinese actually believe what they say when they say this is foreign interference. I've heard, I was just talking to a very good analyst the other day who told me they actually do believe that. It is, of course, the ideas of a fantasist. The people of Hong Kong are not demonstrating because we put them up to it. But the Chinese, political, the Chinese Communist Party, which is removed from the people because it doesn't need to seek the consent of China's 1.3 billion people, they may actually believe stuff like that. And the last one is, I talked to a friend in Hong Kong recently who's a journalist working there, and what she was saying is we have to stop talking about the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, that which was used to crush students in Tiananmen Square in Beijing in 1989. We should stop talking as though it could happen, because it's very unlikely to happen, and by talking about it, it almost normalizes the idea that it could. Obviously, Rich and Neal, there's a possibility that the Communist Party could send a PLA across the border and to crush, they did it in 89 in Beijing. But it would be, the price that China would pay would be so immense, it would be one of its biggest blunders.
Well, you know what? I think they're in a slight checkmate for themselves right now. You're right. In 89, they could have done that. They did do that. They got away with it. But the technology, the ability to see, watch, interact, talk with, and create a wave of emotion didn't exist then as it does today. So for them to come across and do their military exercises, in front of the Grand Hyatt, for example, in Hong Kong, that would send the most amazing images, the most amazing video, the most amazing sound bites that would put China in a very, very difficult position emotionally with the rest of the world. So that's something that they have to, I think, I'm not the expert that you are, but that's the balance that the president is involved in right now. We're dealing in 21st century ability to communicate. We didn't have it in 1989. So things are slightly different today. Plus, you've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people marching and rioting in the streets. That's also slightly different than 1989. You know what I mean? So things are different.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I think that who is going to want to deal with the People's Republic of China or President Xi Jinping if he does something that enormous? If he does, it would be on our screens 24/7. And the consequences will be much greater than the Tiananmen. That's why I think that the likelihood is not very high. To be honest, I could be wrong.
But Mike, let me.
Huge.
But Mike, let me ask you. Let me kind of bring up this point. China. Especially in the most recent years. On the world stage, they're trying to say, hey, look. We are really a strong and stabilizing global partner for the world. Hey, look, we believe in free trade. It is the United States that's into trade wars. We want open markets and free trade. We stand for free trade. Oh, we stand for the climate and we support the Paris Accord, and, we support the climate. Oh, we support the deal with Iran. It's the United States that is the one that's the outlier here. It's the United States that's going against the will of the world. So it is really a fascinating situation where China is trying to be this global citizen, and at the same time, the Hong Kong is blowing up because of democracy and corruption in China, and they're so scared of China interfering with their legal system. I mean, this is a very tough thing to square.
And let me tell you, it's all a fantasy. And the reason why China gets away with it, one important reason, is that Hollywood studios have to submit their scripts to Hollywood Chinese censors because they want a piece of the Chinese box office. So China gets constantly portrayed as a normal country in our movies, in the movies that we see. Ask ourselves the question: have you seen Richard Gere, a major Hollywood movie, in the last 20 years? Because China has vetoed him because of his friendship with the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibetans. So we get this idea in movies that China is a normal country like the Netherlands or Portugal, and it isn't. It's the dictatorship that we see.
So, Mike, we really appreciate. I'm so sorry we're gonna have to do a hard stop. We're out of time. A topic that has got so much to it. We're very pleased to have you with us, Mike Gonzalez from the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for being on the show, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Coming up, we still got a lot to talk about. There's Alibaba. There's NBA franchises going for $3.5 billion. There's Greenland. There's the Democrat primary. So much more to cover here. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, a couple of big deals going on here. Big news this week, the executive vice chairman of Alibaba, Joe Tsai, is going to pay $3.5 billion to buy the Brooklyn Nets and their arena. Another fascinating thing is they're buying the franchise from a Russian billionaire. So from a Russian billionaire to a Chinese billionaire, the most ever paid for a U.S. sports franchise. The Brooklyn Nets, imagine that, $3.5 billion. Alibaba, of course, is the Chinese version of Amazon, but just much, much bigger. I mean, I don't think people realize how big and how successful
It's the biggest company.
Alibaba
it's the biggest
is.
Company in the world. I mean, it's just absolutely astronomically huge.
And it dwarfs. I mean, it dwarfs
crazy.
Amazon. I mean, and we see Amazon like everywhere, an incredible company, but $3.5 billion for a sports franchise.
Well, if this was, for some perverse reason, I keep thinking of like a 1940 zany comedy where a Chinese guy comes to Brooklyn, a really wealthy Chinese guy comes to Brooklyn and buys the baseball team, or in this case, a basketball team, owned by a Chinese guy, pays a fortune for it. And the guys are in, Italian, Jewish environment, Brooklyn. I just think that's funny as can be. It's a great story. I mean, it's a phenomenal story. But, it really doesn't shock me, Neal, because you've been to China a bunch and I've been to China. And you see these incredible billboards of these, great big, NBA guys, the basketball players. They really have this affinity for the NBA. They do. Really big time over
Very
there.
good point. Very good. I mean, but imagine $3.5 billion for the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, what does that make the New York Yankees worth? I mean, what does that make the Dallas Cowboys worth? I mean, it's it's an amazing thing. I guess it's what billionaires want. You got to have a sports team, right? Going to buy myself a ball team.
Well, why don't they buy Greenland? I mean, the president's thinking about buying Greenland. Maybe they should buy Greenland. But
when you think about it, what is it like? There's like 50,000 people in Greenland. I mean, that seems to be like one day's worth of illegal immigrants arriving at our border.
It's one subway in New York City.
Right. So, hey, it's a pretty novel idea. It kind of, when I first read it, I said, is this right or wrong? But, with President Trump, I guess, anything's possible.
Yeah. But I'm sure he had some strategic reasons why he wanted to do it, just like Truman. And by the way, it was back in the 1860s, and don't ask me right now because I just forgot and I lost the names. Two folks in the current administration in the 1860s thought about Greenland as well. So it's been in play a little bit, but it's not exactly green. I mean, it has more ice than Iceland.
Yeah, it's the largest island in the world. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. I'd love to go. Have you ever been to Greenland?
No, I have never been to Greenland. Never thought about going to Greenland. I would like to go to Iceland. Now that we said that, Iceland's in play. That I can do. I can handle that. I would go to. Listen, my wife would go anywhere. I'd go to Greenland. Let's go to. Let's do the show from Greenland. Wait a minute, Phil. We're going to get Phil. We're all going to go. Get everybody from Virginia. We're all going to go to Greenland and do the show.
So anyway, we can't pass up an opportunity to talk about the wacky Democrat primary, and it just keeps on going, man. And this whole thing in Iowa, though, I really believe that Elizabeth Warren is picking up steam. I believe she's going to pull off Iowa. And then what does that mean? She's from Massachusetts. Then the next they all go to New Hampshire. Does she pull off New Hampshire? So she could be 2 for 2 by the time they get to South Carolina. And this is really setting up this huge sort of battle between economic freedom and socialism. I mean, it's really going to come down to this. I think she's going to pull it off.
Well, she might pull it off. I mean, she did have. I found it interesting on the internet.
Well, pull it off to get the nomination on the Democrat side, but I don't think she's going to pull it off in the national election.
Oh no! None of those crazies right now. And I'm sorry for using that, but that's just the way it is. None of those folks are going to make it in the national elections. If anything, it's going to be an unknown person right now that's going to come forward and save the Democratic Party, which I'm not so sure I want them to do, but save the Democratic Party and maybe give him a shot at winning. It sure isn't going to be Biden, who, by the way, I think there's a silver alert on I-95 for Biden's car. Just saying.
Yeah, that's crazy. But, they still keep signing up for the Green New Deal. We're going to be talking about, that in a moment. But what it's going to cost, an average household, what it's going to cost the swing states. I mean, it's kind of as if they're jumping off a cliff here with the Green New Deal. Once the voters sink their teeth into that, how in the world do they expect, especially the swing states, to vote for them when it's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars more just for their average things that they do today? I mean, just, not like adding any more value to their lives or not improving the quality of their lives. And spending so much more. How can they win on that, Rich?
Well, an answer is I don't think they will.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to be brief.
Okay, but hey, the show continues. I mean, we just talked about a second ago about the Green New Deal. We're going to have a discussion with Daniel Turner, Executive Director of Power the Future, and what will the Green New Deal cost the average American household? You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm glad you're back. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin, and we're joined right now with Daniel Turner, who is the Executive Director of Power the Future. Daniel, welcome to Made in America.
Thanks for having me back on. Great to be with you.
So I saw a headline, Joe Biden saying that, hey, look, his climate plan is really the Green New Deal. It's his climate plan. He's adopting the Green New Deal. So he's a so-called moderate Democrat. But there are no more moderate Democrats once Joe Biden
they're
says...
They're gone, man. They're not
gone,
around
man.
anymore.
If Joe says that he's signing up for this, where, everybody else, he, up until, just recently was saying, hey, look, that's going to, it's going to destroy jobs in the country and, the voters are never going to go for it. I mean, he's giving up already, right? I mean, there is no more middle ground.
No, especially on this issue. This is one that of the 24, 25 folks running for office, there is only one who has come out and said that the Green New Deal is untenable, and that's Governor Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado. He's the only one who has said mathematically, scientifically, the Green New Deal is a non-starter. It's not good legislation, and he's polling at basically 0%. I have a better polling number than John Hickenlooper, and that's how radical the party has been dragged on environmental issues.
Well, I agree with you. It is a non-starter. It's a shame. The one Hickenlooper comes out. I saw that. Comes out and tells the truth. They're like, guys, hang on a minute. I don't think this is going to work because it's going to bankrupt the country. Just saying, I think it's a little radical. Let's talk about things that we can deal with. And so what do? They give him a 0%. Actually, I think he owes them
and now he's out of the whole thing. I mean,
and now he's gone. He's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that tells you where they're at, for God's sakes.
In the last debate in real time, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was tweeting at him while he was on the debate stage, really mocking him and calling him cowardly, that he wouldn't take a bold proposal. And I'm tired of the word bold. Everyone keeps saying the Green New Deal is a bold proposal. It's not a bold proposal. It's bad science. It's bad math. It's untenable. It is quite frankly a childish and very stupid proposal. And I'm a little bit angry at the fact that we have to talk about it like it's serious legislation when it was written by a bunch of dummies.
Well, so Daniel, what's it going to cost us? What's it going to cost? I mean, what should the American people know about this? As far what is it going to do to them personally? What's it going to do to their jobs?
Yeah, so we commissioned a study of the Green New Deal and what it would cost households in a couple of key states. And just as a reminder to you and your great listeners, 90% of the Green New Deal doesn't even deal with energy or environmental issues. It talks about health care. It talks about guaranteed jobs for those unwilling to work, which is such an amazing phrase. So we couldn't even quantify any of that data. We just had to push 90% of the Green New Deal aside, and we just focused on what was energy or environmental related. So things like the Green New Deal says by 2030, we can only have electric vehicles. The combustion engine is no longer allowed by the year 2030. Well, we know how many cars there are in the world and in America, and we know what it costs to either retrograde or to replace your car for a green new vehicle. And when you do all these numbers across housing and heating and cars and transportation costs, it is roughly in the first year about $70,000 per household, and in perpetuity, it's between $40,000 and $50,000 per household. Life becomes very, very expensive under a Green New Deal.
Well, it becomes expensive in other ways as well. I mean, here we're saying it's going to cost an average household all this money, at least $70,000 in the first year of its rollout, and $250,000 after 5 years, and that's just right now, things that we do know about. What we don't know about could be even more. But what about, here's this one. What about the number of jobs that are going to be lost? So those households not only going to have to pay more money to maintain those households and their lives, they're not going to have a job with which to pay that. So if you eliminate the fossil fuel industry, you eliminate the car industry, you eliminate the airline industry, you eliminate all basic, the basic socioeconomics of the American structure of economy, then what do you have? What's the real cost? It's a nightmare.
And that's why this number I gave you, which is a shocking number, that is an absolute floor. It's probably way more than that. And just think, look at the house, look at the electricity that you use. Well, you have to change how your electricity is brought into your home. You either need to go for solar, you need to go for wind, you're putting in a geothermal unit. The government's not going to pay for that. You have to. How do you get to work? How do you drive your kids to school? All of those costs, your Amazon delivery that you get, your grocery shopping, all of those things, the cost of becoming green. But like you said, on top of that, other things like healthcare costs, just life itself becomes so expensive. And don't believe this nonsense when they say it will create jobs. Barack Obama spent 8 years and $100 billion promising to create green jobs. I have studied it for years. I cannot find one. Literally, I cannot find one green job, $100 billion and 8 years later. So don't believe we'll create new green jobs, because it's just a lie.
Well, Daniel, we remember Solyndra, right? I mean, what happens with things like this?
That was a good one.
Big government takeover of, well, in this particular case, everything, and through the energy industry, and then dominating everything else. What we find, though, which is very, very scary, is cronyism. Imagine the government cronyism. I mean, who's going to get the job? Who's going to get the contracts to do all this stuff? Well, you mentioned President Obama in green energy. Well, that was Solyndra. How much did the American taxpayers pay on that? Was that $500
million? Yeah. Yeah, and the share owners of that company did very well. They all just walked away with basically right taxpayer. So that's what we should all do. If the Green New Deal were to go into effect, we should all quit our jobs. We should all start front groups in either windmills or solar factories and then just take government contracts and walk away, because that will be the only way to have any source of income under a Green New Deal.
And then it becomes self-perpetuating, because all of that sort of cronyism then funnels back to the political system in ways of buying off politicians, and it just keeps on going. It just keeps on going. Hey, Daniel, we gotta take a short break. We're talking to Daniel Turner, Executive Director of Power of the Future. A lot more to talk about. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin, and we are back with Daniel Turner, Executive Director of Power the Future. So, Daniel, we just talked about bold new ideas. Don't be afraid of bold ideas. What was it? Elizabeth Warren was, you got to think big. You got to think big. You think big or you go home. So what should those who love economic freedom? I mean, if we were to think big, if we were to put some really bold idea out to sort of counter the Green New Deal, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many places in America that are blessed with tremendous, abundant natural resources. Look at the Permian Basin, which straddles Texas and New Mexico. It created for the state of New Mexico $1.2 billion budget surplus last year. It's creating thousands of jobs. People are leaving places like Louisiana and moving to New Mexico because of jobs. Look at the border between Pennsylvania and my beloved home state of New York. Look at the cost of home prices, GDP, income in Pennsylvania, because they have not. You know why? Because they don't have Andrew Cuomo as the governor.
That's right.
Fracking is allowed. There are jobs. There's employment. You cross the border into upstate New York. It's the opposite. Right. And so that is what a bold idea is to say, how do we turn upstate New York into Pennsylvania? And then people will say, fracking, it's so dangerous. Fracking is so deadly. Well, show me these Pennsylvania problems, please, because I do this for a living, right? If there was a community that was suffering from fracking, it would be on the top story of CNN as much as that missing Malaysia Airlines flight, right? But they can't find it. We have 1 million fracked wells right now in America. If there was one kid who was coughing because of it, it would be on the front page of every newspaper. But because they can't find that kid, they lie. And that is how the Green New Deal comes into success, or comes into notoriety, is you have to lie about the truth. And I don't have to lie about the truth of fossil fuels, because we see it every day.
So what you're saying, and I agree with you, that one of the things working against us dramatically is the nexus between the left-wing mainstream media as well as the Democratic Progressive Socialist Party. And so,
absolutely.
But you know what I find interesting, and they don't talk about this. Look what's been happening in the last few weeks. We have Hong Kong having problems. We have Iran grabbing and blowing up tankers, which they did a couple of months ago, and grabbing tankers and so forth. If this was, 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, and during the Obama administration, the price of oil would be what? It would be through the roof, wouldn't it? The minute we sat, we thought exactly. It would be just astonishing. What is the cost of gasoline today? It's normal.
Last time we had this level of hostility with Iran, I was actually working with the State Department at the time in the Bush administration, and oil hit $146 a barrel.
That's right. That's right.
And look at where we are now. Look at the hostility. Like it's such a brilliant point you raise. You look at the hostility with Iran. You look at what's happened to Venezuela, which has collapsed since this last level of $146 a barrel oil. Where is oil now? I think it's at $54. Right.
That's exactly correct, because they're irrelevant. They're irrelevant in the global world. We are a net exporter. It is the most brilliant political move that this administration could have made. In short, here's the précis. We don't need them.
No, we don't. We not at all, not for our prosperity. And that is a great point that we need to make. And the other great point we need to make even about green technology and the Green New Deal, which I'm not opposed to green technology. Where they make sense and where they're not subsidized by the taxpayers, I think they have a lot of great promise. But for example, Wall Street Journal put this report out last week. One windmill on the land requires 2,500 tons of steel because they have to be anchored into the ground. Of concrete. 2,500 tons. What is concrete made from, right? Is it made from dirt and leaves? No, it's made mostly from coal and coal byproducts, right? One windmill is 400 tons of steel. What forges steel? Coal. How do you get steel? Ore. You have to excavate. So this idea that windmills are somehow green is in and of itself a lie, because you need a ton of fossil fuels to make one windmill. So if we're going to use coal to make a windmill, why don't we just use coal to use coal?
Why don't we just use coal?
I would love to ask them in the debate that I won't get asked to.
But Dan, why don't we
just to hear it explained that way? It's just so silly. I mean, it's just you said it so well, Dan. I mean, it's just so silly.
Why don't we just use clean coal tech? You know, no one's talking about clean coal technology anymore.
Which we dominate.
We've made tremendous strides. Dan, tell us about that.
And we have absolutely dominated. And again, I talked about the success of Pennsylvania versus New York, and that is a wonderful example of it. And where you don't have clean coal technology is China, which has a dirty coal plant coming online at the rate of about one a week. Right, and so if the Green New Deal warriors, if the Greenpeaces and the Sierra Clubs really wanted to stop climate change as they understand it and define it, they would leave America and go set up shop in China. But like you mentioned, the Hong Kong protesters, who's going to do that, right? Who's going to go to China and say you have to change your ways? And so what do? They shut down communities in West Virginia, and they try to go after communities in Wyoming and Alaska. Michael Bloomberg has a $500 million campaign to shut down coal when it is clean and it is an amazing cheap source of energy, and we have so much of it. So again, these green warriors are fighting the wrong fight.
So that's the point. I mean, Rich brought it up, and we brought it up many times on the show. We do have clean coal technology. I mean, if we spent a fraction on clean coal technology like we have done on boondoggles such as Solyndra, we would be perfecting it. It would be even that much better. We would then export that technology to places like China and India and other countries who burn coal. And they're going to continue to do it because it's cheap and it's ready, available, right? They're not going to change. And we would solve a lot of the climate issues by helping these developing countries with clean coal technology, because they're going to use it no matter what we say in this country. Let's help them. We'll do much more for the planet. We'll be doing much more for our grandchildren than anything else we can do to clean up the environment by using American ingenuity and technology in exporting and creating jobs. Hey, Daniel, thanks for being on the show. Unfortunately, we're out of time. It was a great segment. Great to be with you. Daniel Turner, he's the executive director of Power of the Future, a very important voice on this topic. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Thanks for staying with us. We're back. I'm Neal Asbury, your host, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, the show has gone by again in a flash.
Yeah, it does do that.
It's been really great to be with you, but, you know, it's so exciting. These are exciting times. I know that it gets very frustrating. I know that you and I read a lot of the same things, and, you know, we open up our papers, we go online, we do all our reading. You know, I read a lot. I must confess, you know, I read a lot of the New York Times. I read a lot of Politico. And you say, why would I do that? I read a lot of the Washington Post. And there's so much, it's just so toxic, everything that you're reading. And there's just not anything good to say. There's just nothing good to say about this country. There's just, they're just dragging it down, and it doesn't matter what the president does. It doesn't matter if there's success about creating jobs. It doesn't matter if there's success in creating prosperity and in growing our country and making it stronger and investing in our military and in the way that people see us around the world. Like we talked earlier about how people in Hong Kong are holding up the American flag as a sign of freedom. They just have nothing good to say about this country.
Well, the thing that, in all honesty, I'm very, very concerned about this. You look at the young folks in Hong Kong fighting. Literally, I mean, this is very dangerous. I don't think people here understand that. You don't go up against the Chinese government when you're there. It's a really bad place to go to jail. You don't want to get arrested in China. You will disappear. I mean, this is not a good place to get arrested. So these folks are in the streets. Hundreds of thousands, maybe 500,000 people at a shot throughout the island of Hong Kong, and they're fighting for democracy. They're using. I mean, it's stunning, Neal, that they would have our flags en masse throughout their protestations to the Chinese government, because they don't want to be involved in the communist socialist environment. That's not what they want. They want a democratic environment. And then I listened to the absolute insanity coming out of the Democratic Party of these young folks supporting them, saying, oh, no, socialism's great. Bernie Sanders is a moron. He's an absolute uneducated moron. I'm sorry. You listen to some of these other talk show hosts. I cannot give this man the respect, because how could you endorse exactly what the folks in Hong Kong are fighting against? Doesn't that seem weird to you?
Well, I mean, it should be like the lights are flashing. I mean,
oh my God, can't you see it, folks? Here you have
economic freedom, a very prosperous place. You have Big Brother. You have the control of the government, who controls everything. They ultimately get control of the legal system. They're so scared that their courts, will just become kangaroo courts. Anybody can be extradited back to China at any time to face China law. And it just scares the bejesus out of them. And they don't want that kind of a country. That's not what Hong Kong stands for. Hong Kong stands for freedom. And they are fighting so hard to hold on to it from a very authoritarian government. And that's what ultimately socialism becomes, right? That's what socialism becomes. So when we talk about our Democrat primary, and we're calling it the Democrat Socialist Party of the United States, I mean, there is a real threat here, people. This is not being imagined. I mean, just take a look at what's happening in Hong Kong. And Rich, I'll also say this. I mean, look at how, what's happening today with Hong Kong and the support and, the solidarity and, President Trump, stay away from Hong Kong and encouraging them and freedom is so important. But remember when this happened back in Iran and during Iran, there was, the opposition was getting stronger and stronger in the demonstrations, and they were out in the street. And they were fighting for more freedom. They wanted democracy. They were looking to the United States. Show us a sign of support. Do something. Show us that you're with us. And President Obama was completely silent.
Nope.
I mean, here was an opportunity to have real change in Iran for the people who were taking it in their own hands, just looking to the United States for inspiration, and we did not give it to them. Look at what's happening this time. Yes, the president is giving this inspiration, and therefore the Democrats, you see Pelosi, you see Schumer, you're seeing them giving support to the folks in Hong Kong because the president has done so. They feel obligated to do it. But where were they in Iran?
That's just unbelievable. They had the opportunity. The momentum was developing in Iran. The youth were trying to do what's happening in Hong Kong. We look the other way. Let's hit it right there.
Yes. Hey, Rich, another passionate show.
You bet.
We could have kept on going and going and going. So much to talk about. But unfortunately, we're out of time. But we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.